on this aspect of consciousness, that how our people, Lord Rama, that epoch, his Guruji, sage Vasishtha, then parallelly Sita's father, Raja Janaka, and his dialogue with Ashtavakra, and how Lakshman Gita, which came out as a result of discussion between Lord Rama, Lakshman, and Sita during their Vanavasa period. So you can see some, when you read books and when you say, "Oh, I read the book of 18th century," and somebody says, "Oh, I also read the book of 18th century," and somebody else also, "I read the book of 18th century," it will have a common theme. It will have some essence belonging to that particular epoch. And we can conclude, I think, quite safely that those days, the main topic of discussion was consciousness. There's a whole Vasishtha Sanhita on consciousness. Lakshman Gita discussion with Rama and Mother Sita is also on consciousness. When you read Ashtavakra Gita, it's all about, the dialogue between Raja Janaka and Ashtavakra. It's all consciousness again. Today, scientists are busy exploring what this consciousness is, and there is no really one way of defining consciousness. It's a very touchy subject also. To understand consciousness, we have to use consciousness. Those days, all these super minds of that era discussed all those topics that somehow matters to human life. Because fundamentally, when we talk of evolution, body, as we discussed last time, physical body cannot evolve. My body is only going to age. That's outermost part of my existence. Innermost part of my existence that supports my life is my soul, my jivan, my atman. And Shastras say that it is immutable, it cannot change. Why cannot it change? Because it is purest, it is immutable. What can you add to the ultimate purity? It sounds quite absurd. Then what are we trying to evolve? It is consciousness. Now, in order to understand evolution of consciousness, we have to understand what is present level of consciousness and what is the trajectory of my consciousness I am planning to arrive at, and what makes this consciousness. Is it just one single thing, or is it multiple things in one go, or all these things they combine and say, okay, this is consciousness? So we have to first define what is consciousness so that we can further our discussion. These days only scientists seems to be talking, or the brains. The lay person don't seem to bother. Even the devotees of gods, they don't care about what consciousness is and why should it matter to us. Is it really that important? Ritualistically, we do worship in the temple and blah, 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 all those kinds of things. But all these worships, do they really change my consciousness? So if temple worship, all the things that I am doing is not going to change my consciousness, if day-to-day living that I am undergoing, it's not going to change my consciousness, then what is it that is going to change my consciousness? So we have to explore all this in details. See. To my understanding, Consciousness is all about degree of awareness, simply put. By that, it also means degree of unawareness. To what extent I remain unaware, to what extent I remain aware. That's all about consciousness. Awareness or the consciousness of a stone versus consciousness of a grass or a small plant, things like touch me not plant. Moment you touch the leaves wrinkle up. How does this sunflower understand this, that sunlight is moving and I should also turn around for maximum solar light reception? The flower also turns as the sun moves. That is also a kind of consciousness. When you plant lauki or ridge gourd or what you call butter gourd, and they have tendrils at the end of there, and they're like hooks. And as soon as in its vicinity it finds some support, just hangs on to it and locks itself with it. That is also a kind of awareness. When you try to cut a tree with an axe, you can see how violently the tree moves. Versus even when the wind is blowing at 60 miles, 80 miles an hour, it doesn't feel as violent as somebody is trying to cut it through an axe. So they have some level of consciousness. Once I was in Austria in one of the hotels, and I couldn't sleep in the hotel. See, so almost all night I kept on witnessing the snowfall. It was snowing then, see, and I saw the trees, and you keep wondering, I'm inside the room, and the trees are outside. They don't have leaves. Nothing is left on them. How they must be feeling at this moment, their consciousness. And how all of a sudden, when the winter is over, they get into some sort of a life and the green again covers it up. That is also a kind of consciousness to me. Human beings, when you talk of animals like dogs, consciousness of a dog differs from a consciousness of a donkey. And that's why we call some people, "Chla donkey aadmi hai." Because it doesn't understand and doesn't move. Even when you're driving and there is all of a sudden donkey just standing there and you keep on honking. Donkey doesn't want to move from the road, doesn't want to listen. That's why we end up calling some people, "वो तो donkey आदमी है, सुनता ही नहीं है किसी की." So that also reflects some level of consciousness. In our human interactions, as I was mentioning, donkey-like people, they have different level of consciousness. It's like, your child is sleeping and you try to wake him up. There are multiple scenarios where some children, as soon as you're walking just outside and you're just about to reach the room and try to open the door, even just before you open the door, they're already up. Papa is coming or mommy is coming, and they just suddenly get up and say, "Good morning, Papa, good morning, mommy," and they wake up with a smile and hug you. There are other sorts of children also who knows Papa has entered the room. He understands very well. Papa is in the room. You try to tap him. By wood, by wood, please get up. It's morning. It's time to go to school. You'll be late otherwise. He hears all these things, but ignores it perfectly well. See. He is determined, I will not get up. Unless, of course, you adopt some other means. If you are sleeping, I can wake you up. But if you are pretending that you are sleeping, no one can wake them up. See? Similarly, consciousness, imagine a consciousness of a couple. They are fighting like hell in the bedroom. And suddenly their 4-year-old enters the room. What can happen at that time? What will happen to the consciousness or the reaction of the couple? Either they stop fighting and enter the silent zone or keep smiling artificially. Oh, my baby is inside, and you'll hug. Or would you continue shouting at each other? If you continue shouting at each other, despite your loved one, the little fellow has entered the room, your adamancy of going on fighting also reflects a level of consciousness. So we are trying to somehow understand rigid consciousness and flexible consciousness. This still doesn't explain to us what is it made up of. See. But this extent to which my consciousness can become flexible and extent to which my consciousness can remain rigid defines me, defines myself as a human being. See. Flexible people are more accommodative. Rigid people, nobody likes to interact with. They like to stay away from such people. You may have married a wonderful person, but association of being married to a rigid versus flexible determines the happiness and harmony of a family. So consciousness, I think, plays a very, very important role in everyday life.